I have not played Max Payne in a long time, so I will reacquaint myself with the critically acclaimed series with a technologically inferior handheld port of its maiden voyage. I am sure this is the right way to go about things, and I'm sure you all agree. Mini Max Payne for the Game Boy Advance has most factors working against it. The Game Boy Advance library is littered with really bad ports of console games, but the bad is definitely outweighed by the good here. In case you did not know, Max Payne is a wisecracking street smart cop who plays by his own rules, and his wife and baby got dead. Oh no, that's really sad. Payne must be going through some pain, but there's no way it's as painful as trying to do an unboxing video for a brand new Game Boy Advance game. Are you excited to watch me peel some shrink wrap? Yeah, someone killed Max's family, probably because Max's wife found out about something that would cost an evil megacorporation lots of money. I'm sure this never happens in real life, so you shouldn't worry about it. Just consume, relax, ignore their ever-increasing grip over all facets of society. Who needs to air grievances? You should be fired for having an opinion different than that of your employer. Buy a big, expensive TV and then you'll be happy. This iteration of Rockstar's third-person shooter takes the form of an isometric action game. Environments are pre-rendered, but Max and every other character are made of polygons. Great job by the graphics team here. The sprites look good, and I think Max Payne's downgraded lower fidelity aesthetic on the handheld lends itself well to the grim and gritty subject matter. Organized crime, drug-dealing pagans, Max Payne getting reverse Chris Benoit, all this is packaged with a film noir motif that becomes more of what the game aims to be through grainy graphics and grainier audio clips. This port was made during a time when putting voiceovers on a cartridge was still kind of impressive. The box boasts over 30 minutes of recorded dialogue, and it is excellent dialogue paired with a comparable caliber of voice acting.
Turn around, walk away, blow town. That would have been the smart thing to do. Guess I wasn't that smart. Lupino's tenement buildings were a seedy hangout for all kinds of sleaze. A liquor store, a pawn shop, a laundromat full of mobster bookies and loan sharks. The list went on. The how and why of it was a mystery to me, but they knew I was a cop. They knew I was coming, and they were going to get real trigger happy about it.
Much of the imagery remains brutal despite graphical handicaps. Max Payne Jr. received a mature ESRB rating because of this, which is uncommon for handheld games of this era. Blood that looks like your mom's spaghetti sauce splatters across the walls if an enemy is killed in close proximity to the level boundaries. Polygonal and or pixelated blood flows like wine at a spinster's birthday party. Even at a lower resolution, the violence here carries a weight equivalent to that of its console source material. Bullet time is Max Payne's defining feature. Development of the original was finished in the very earliest years of the 21st century, and everyone loved The Matrix during this time. The development team took that film's notable cinematic technique and put it into a game, and it was awesome. For the uninitiated, this particular gameplay element alters the fabric of time, placing everything within it in slow motion. With the press of a button, Max does a dive and fires off shots before the enemy can do any damage. This technique is just as defensive as it is offensive. Enemies cannot do much harm to Max while he's pumped full of adrenaline and pain-killing opioids. Yeah, that's how you restore health in this game. You do oral heroin. Max can pull the trigger faster in such a state of being. If Max has no adrenaline, he can't go into bullet time, and he'll need every bit of that adrenaline because this game is very difficult without bullet time. Your strategy for beating this game will not change much from start to finish. I found a great deal of success by immediately going into a slow motion dive as soon as I entered a room, firing off blind shots in every direction until I heard a grunt and or groan originating from one of them. Max Payne's transition from third-person shooter to isometric shooter is almost perfect, but the camera needed to be zoomed out just a touch more. This would have reduced the amount of blind damage taken throughout the game, but the developers did mitigate this issue with dynamic music that shifts along with the in-game circumstances. The Max Payne theme plays when enemies are dead or not present in a room. This version version doesn't have the frequency range of the original, but again, the lower fidelity works to create a more dour mood. Max outside of bullet time takes damage very easily, and you will quickly drain the given allotment of lives should you forego its usage. This annoyed me, but you continue at the beginning of the chapter should your lives for it run out, and no chapter is so long that starting over becomes a demoralizing experience. Max Payne advances not without intermittent perception issues, which originate from the isometric camera perspective. I experienced a number of deaths at certain locations because I could not tell where hazards ended and began. These were not frequent, so they didn't tip the game's quality scale in the wrong direction. Every flaw here is minor. Most of Max's weapons are good, and the collective quality of them increases as the game approaches its conclusion, but weapons like grenades and Molotov cocktails are ineffective and unnecessary, like your mom when she cooks. Yeah, she needs to work on that. I'm sorry. She's a nice lady, but man, she can't cook. You're only required to use grenades twice in the whole game. This happens towards the end, and I was kind of irritated by this because at no other previous point was the game's progression contingent upon weapon context. A platforming section also gets shoehorned into matters just moments after this, but it was simple enough to get through. The potential perils of an isometric camera in this situation were never realized. Independent of anything I mentioned previously is how the game flows. Some might say it's repetitive to wander from room to room shooting bad guys and activating cutscenes whenever an exclamation point appears over Max's head, but it's not. Every room and every chapter is unique from the last, and Max moves pretty quickly when there's only a few things on screen at once. The speedy clip at which movement takes place is hardly betrayed even when the semi-frequent frame rate drops come around. I beat the game in about 4 hours, even with dying, restarting chapters, and wandering through levels and accomplishing nothing in doing so. You get to start off each subsequent playthrough with all the inventory accumulated in the previous. You also get new difficulty levels and cheats, altering the gameplay experience each time your urges urge your video game addled mind to start from scratch. For a pretty short game, there's a lot of replay value. I don't know how long it took to make a Game Boy Advance ready port of Max Payne, and I'm also unaware of the date upon which development began, but the timing of this release is worth talking about. Max Payne 2 was released in October of 2003, which was approximately 2 years after the release date of Max Payne 1. That's a reasonable gestation period for a sequel, but Max Payne 1's handheld version was released just 2 months after Max Payne 2. As far as the internet will let me know, this edition of Max Payne didn't climb very high on the sales charts, but I'm sure it would have done a lot better if it was released a year earlier. Maybe they could have added some additional dialogue or weapons to give fans of the first game an extra incentive to play this port while it was still fresh in their minds, while their clamors for a sequel were at their most fervent. Maybe then we could have had Max Payne 2 on the smaller screen, but it was not meant to be, and that makes me a little bit sad because Max Payne does well here, well enough to leave me wanting more.